Belichick, who just passed George Halas, second all-time wins, 325. I think I heard Robert Kraft say the number is like 280 plus with the Patriots. Obviously, he's done the majority of his winning with New England, and specifically Tom Brady. And I know that I get a lot would be strong. It's like, when you see a controversy on the internet, like a lot of blowback. What, 7 tweets? That's your classic new media thing. Like, there's a lot of controversy. Yeah, because 18 people on the internet are pissed off. No one actually gives a shit. But I do think it's fair that if you hate Belichick, that you debate that he's a little overrated in the sense that he can only do it with Tom. Now, is Bill Walsh winning anything without Joe Montana? Part of being a good coach is having an elite quarterback. And Parcells was really the one guy who had the greatest defensive player of all time, and Belichick was a part of that. And remember, if you've watched The Two Bills, the documentary on the 30 for 30, Parcells basically gave Belichick the credit for scheming the defense against, I don't know, the greatest offense of all time in Bill Walsh and slowing them down. Pretty sure that the game plan is in the Hall of Fame. So I hold Belichick to a very high regard. Now, some people push back. And they go, Middlekauff, he's just overrated. He needed Brady. And I'm not disputing that him and Brady weren't a match made in football heaven. That they needed each other. Just like Michael Jordan, once upon a time, needed Phil Jackson. Like, they did well together, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think sometimes Patrick Mahomes is a fucking star, all-time great quarterback. Andy Reid, all-time great coach. Like, they needed each other. And there's nothing wrong with that. And they're having a lot of success together. Now, if Patrick went to some other team right now, there is a chance that it'd be easier for him to win a Super Bowl than it would if he just left Coach Reid and Coach Reid had to find a quarterback. Why? It's very difficult. Now, Belichick picks every single player with the team. So if you want to be critical of his GM skills, I totally understand that. He has made picks over the years that are beyond head-scratching. And I disagreed with taking Mac Jones at 15th overall. Now, I understood they needed a quarterback, right? You couldn't operate. I believe, and I'll argue this till I'm 6 feet under, to go 7-9 the year that they led the league in people opting out of the season with Cam Newton as their quarterback, who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn if he was standing on the top of the horse. He wouldn't have been able to hit water if he was in the middle of the ocean. He was god-awful. And Belichick went 7-9. And then last year, he went 11-5. Or I guess 11-6 now because they got 17 games. With Mac Jones, I did the math today. He is 15-10 because he's 4-4 this year, and he was 11-6 last year. So he's 15-10 with Mac Jones as starting quarterback. And Bailey Zappi mixed in there for a couple. Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones, if I gave the majority of coaches, like to me, there is a short list of guys that can compete with this roster. And again, I do not dispute that the roster being relatively average is on Belichick. This is his doing. But he's such a great coach. He has Matt Patricia and Joe Judge coaching his offense. I mean, think about that. Like, the one thing I will not pivot and I will take the L, because it's pretty clear the Patriots are going to get to like 9 or 10 wins. And I thought they would be 5-6. And I'm going to say over and over, I was wrong on that. And I underestimated how great this guy is. But I will not pivot off Patricia and Joe Judge. Because if you put those guys on the street right now, there ain't a soul in Power 5 and definitely the National Football League that's hiring Matt Patricia to be their offensive coordinator. And Joe Judge, position coach, you could argue whatever. But to be the quarterback coach, I mean, that's the most important position on your team, especially with a young quarterback. So their offense isn't that great, and partly because their quarterback stinks. Mac Jones is a backup. And this isn't personal. He's probably a good guy. Just like Bailey Zappi, probably a good guy. Those guys are mediocre average players. And to win in the NFL when you have a mediocre average quarterback is very impressive. And that speaks to how good you are as a coach. It's why when he played the Jets, I had someone around the Jets tell me, and this number might be off, but basically over a 3-year period of time, they had 8 or 9, high picks. That's like top 75 picks, right? They made the trade for Jamal Adams. They had multiple first-round picks. They've had a bunch of ammo high in the draft. And he's like, if we hit on 8 of the 9 high picks, and it looks like they have, we'll see. Elijah Moore, it's a little weird, but Breece Hall's a stud. The dude, Garrett Wilson's a stud. Their offensive line's really good. Like, Sauce Gardner's a star. Like, they just banging out picks. And the one pick we miss on is Zach Wilson. We're in trouble. And he's like, on the flip side, if we missed on every single one of those guys, we missed on 8 of the 9 picks, but the one pick we hit on is Zach Wilson, everyone here is getting extensions. And that's the way the NFL works. It's a quarterback league. And the one coach, or there's very few, like Sean Payton kind of did it last year. He played an NFL season with like 7 different quarterbacks and somehow won 9 games. And if it wasn't for this crazy comeback win for the 49ers, the New Orleans Saints would have made the playoffs last year. Playing games with Ian Book, Taysom Hill, Jameis for a couple games. Like, that was insane what they did last year. And they still won 9 games. Like, you see Dan Campbell, like, they got players on their team, and they're going to win like 3 games this season. And that was like Sean Payton's guy. So it's very, very hard to win in the NFL when you have average to below quarterback play. Like, I'm not breaking news here. And the Jets are a good example of, they got good players everywhere now. Hell, they just lost a couple star players in Breece Hall and Tucker, and their main problem is their quarterback. He's not that good. He's not a reliable player. He doesn't play smart. Like, when you watch him play yesterday, I'm recording this on Monday, so if you listen on Tuesday a couple days ago, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? It's just like kind of basic stuff. Some of his picks, it's one thing if you throw an interception. Like if you watch games on Saturday and Sunday, sometimes a defensive player will make an incredible play, right? He'll fake going left and then he'll cut back right and he'll get into a passing lane and pick the ball off. He'll fake like he's dropping into coverage. He'll blitz and he'll make a play. There was a pick that Trevor Lawrence threw like on a rollout, and he threw this BB, and the DB just like leaped up in the air. It was like, that's a pretty good defensive play. And then there are balls that Zach Wilson throws that like hit Devin McCourty in his stomach. It's like, are you throwing it to the Patriots? And the reason I love New England this week is not because I think they have better players than the Jets. I think they're probably pretty similar. If anything, the Jets might even have more high-end talent, especially more upside guys at skill positions. Like the Patriots don't have a Garrett Wilson. They didn't. I guess their running their running back's pretty good, but the Jets have a really good pass rush. Like, the Jets are really talented, but their quarterback is just a major, major liability. And listen, I'm not going to write the guy's career off, though I know I have close friends that are scouting directors and people in the NFL that told me, I don't see it. I never believed in it. And what I don't quite understand is, one, that quarterback draft is looking very, very questionable. It's got a long way to go. But why the Jets got so dead set on Zach Wilson, I'll just never get it. And why, like, to me, Justin Fields was the number 2 pick in that draft, like the number 2 quarterback of the group, just because blue chip guy, 5-star guy, the talent. Like, if I'm going to mold any of the other cats, it was going to be him. They all were a work in progress, yet somehow that guy was, the 4th quarterback off the board, right? Zach Wilson, then even Trey Lance. Like, if I was Kyle Shanahan, I would have taken Justin Fields. Now, I understood taking Trey Lance, but I never quite got the Zach Wilson. Not because he's not talented. Like, you see him roll out, sling it. Honestly, he's kind of got some Aaron Rodgers level talent, and I don't mean as a player. I just mean physical abilities. His ability to roll out, his ability to sling it from different arm angles, but the ball does not go where Aaron Rodgers throws it, and he does not make good decisions. So when you don't have those going for you, I can't trust your accuracy, and 2, I can't trust your decision-making. It's very hard to play football on Sundays. And when you consistently do that, you get people fired. Because ultimately, if that quarterback play is poor, that's when people lose their jobs. And I'm not saying Saleh and Joe Douglas are losing their jobs anytime soon, but if this kid's a bust, I don't see how they overcome that. That's going to royally screw them. And then, the 49ers and Rams game. I look back, like, obviously the Rams, I have no problem with them putting all their chips in the middle of the table. They've made aggressive trades, and they've directly benefited from it. And I say it all the time, I admire the shit out of aggressive people. Because for the most part, in most industries, aggressive wins. If you want to stay in the slow lane, that's fine. You're going to get passed. Now, the people in the fast lane, every once in a while, depending on what happened in their given profession, might get in a car crash. But it's not like you're any less likely to get into a car crash in the other lanes. And the other thing is, the majority of the people in the fast lane, when they do hit, they shoot up like a rocket ship. And look at the Rams. They have made, they hang their hat on F them picks, and they got Matt Stafford and they won the Super Bowl. But even before that, when they traded for Jalen Ramsey, like, Jalen Ramsey's a stud. That's a trade that every team in the league should be interested in making. And they've benefited from it. But when you do that, it puts a premium on your other picks, right? The other picks that you have, especially like there are some years when, and they in 2020 and 2021, their first pick in those drafts were in the second round, and they missed on both guys. And you can't afford to miss on the first pick you have when you don't have a first rounder. Your margin for error, and also part of making the trades for Matt Stafford and for Jalen Ramsey, is they had to give them massive contracts. So when you make that trade, it's a double whammy. I make the trade so I lose draft picks, and then I sign guys to huge contracts. And in Stafford's case, I inherit his contract, and then I extend it. Like, that takes my salary cap. So it's a double whammy. And I got no problem doing that. But when you do that, you have to take advantage of your second and third round picks. Why? Because those guys' cap number is so small. And I looked, in 2020, they took Cam Akers. Well, now Sean McVay hates the guy. Can't stand him, doesn't play him. And in 2021, they took Tutu Atwell, a speed wide receiver who does nothing. And when I watch them play the 49ers, their biggest flaw, like their offensive line has always been a question mark. They win 10 to 11 games every single year. They won the Super Bowl last year with an average offensive line at best. So yeah, would you like the offensive line to be better? Of course you would. The 49ers went to a Super Bowl and they went to an NFC Championship game with Mike fucking McGlinchey playing right tackle. So if your offensive scheme is good enough and your play caller is good enough and you have enough skill guys around it, I would say you can out-scheme an offense. Look at the Bengals. Last year, they made it to the playoffs with a bad offensive line. Forever, Google who some of the guys Peyton Manning played with at offensive line. Google some of the guys Tom Brady played with at offensive line. Listen, I'm a Fresno State guy. I don't know him personally, but I followed his career, and he's now the long, shaggy guy that sits next to Ken Dorsey in the box. Last year, he sat next to Brian Daboll. His name is Ryan Wendell. I think he's the assistant offensive line coach for the Bills, and he's been with Sean McDermott for a while. He started in a Super Bowl. Kyle DeVan, who's also now an offensive line coach, I think in the Pac-12, started with Peyton Manning in a Super Bowl. Like, these guys are fringe, like practice squad guys. So you don't need Trent Williams at every single position to make a run at offensive line. But you can't afford to miss on your high draft picks when you do not have first-round picks. And going to Cam Akers, and then a year later, Sean McVay hating the guy, and Tutu Atwell, who just does nothing for you, is kind of a disaster. Because if you had just taken two players at whatever positions, let's say a tight end, and let's say a DB, let's say a pass rusher, and let's say a guard, and those guys are just starters, they would have way more depth on their team, and they wouldn't feel as top-heavy. But they whiffed on back-to-back second-round picks. And here's the other thing. I like Sean McVay. How could you not? I mean, his resume speaks for itself. But he learned in the Shanahan scheme. And I think philosophically he likes throwing the ball more than most Shanahan guys, which I'm for. Like, I worked in the league under Andy Reid. Like, I'm pro throwing the football. But when you have leads against other physical teams and you have an inability to run the ball, you're going to get in precarious situations, especially when you have a quarterback who turns the ball over a lot. And on Sunday, they're up 14-0 against the 49ers in the second half. And the Niners get the ball at a half, and they basically go 3 and out. And the Rams get the ball back. That is the type drive that you just hand the ball off over and over and over and bleed the clock out and extend your lead. Instead, they couldn't because they just naturally get pass happy. Why? Because their starting running back is Ronnie Rivers, who, Fresno State guy, I'm rooting for the guy. I watched the guy in college play a lot. It never crossed my mind once watching Ronnie Rivers play at Fresno State that he would play on Sundays. Now, if you told me he went to a training camp or was in OTAs, I'd believe you. But be the starter for the defending Super Bowl champs, I do not understand how the Los Angeles Rams, remember, when Sean McVay became a star, his starting running back was Todd Gurley, a freak talent, a guy that was drafted 10th overall with a torn ACL. Now, ultimately, as his career went, his knee gave out on him. But Sean McVay became a transcendent coach and a name that we all knew because his starting running back dominated. And ever since they've transitioned away from him, they have not been able to replace that position, which ironically, in theory, should be the easiest position to replace. The majority of teams find guys in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round. Yet the Rams invested in Cam Akers, which I know a lot of people around the league, they really like the guy, has been a disaster. And now the head coach doesn't like him, and their inability to run the ball is a big reason to me they are a very, very flawed team this year and in major, major trouble. Thanks for watching 3 and Out. You can check out the podcast below in the description, and make sure you subscribe right now to the Volumes YouTube channel.